Hi, I'm Alexander Stathatos, and this is my term paper presentation. I want to start off with saying that I did heavily use the BLM movement for influence. Not maybe not influence per se, but for examples and to relate my topic to people. As I just stated, I did my term paper on persuasion and social movement. So really in social movement, or in persuasion in general, I believe, there are three large forms. To start off, I'll start with the strategy form, and then I'll talk about persuasion, and then after that I will wrap it up with forms of influence. The four forms of influence. So to start off with strategies of persuasion in social movements, it's really it sort of starts off with an initial introduction to people. Say there was a man named James, and he hears about the BLM movement. Now he goes and say he just hears about it and looks at what it is. He sees online about it's a movement to spread awareness and support for Black Lives Matter after the George Floyd situation, and how it heavily expanded after that and became a large international actually situation. And he sees this, and he can either do one of two things. He can accept it, or he can deny it. And so if he accepts it, it doesn't mean he supports it. It doesn't mean he doesn't support it. He accepts that it is a thing, and it is a situation that is happening or exists, and that it actually has meaning or influence behind it. And after that initial acceptance, later on, James, the same man, could go to believing in it or stay at acceptance. So say that he hears more, and he's at college and this issue keeps coming up, and it comes up in his teacher's classroom, or his professor's classroom. And they go around the room asking people that want to raise their hand, and he hears everything about it that these students and classmates are saying, and even the professor. And after this, he can either go to support it by using his own influences, or physically going to rallies and riots, or talking to other people about the cause behind it and trying to garner more support for it. And then that is essentially the gist of the strategy that I believe I wanted to focus on through social movements with persuasion. And then I go to talk about tactics. And what tactics talk about is that there is multiple ways to do things and spread awareness or garner support or compliance gain. And what the BLM movement did with this, or any movement really, is what I wanted to talk about. I didn't want to focus on the BLM the whole time. It can be brash tactics. It can be positive, small, just influence usage, such as the posting, I think it was Blackout Tuesday, and showing support through BLM movement through online by just changing your icon or your user icon to a fist to show your support for it. And as I just talked about the brash tactics, it's more of a polarizing effect is what it has. And what I mean by that is, to show an example, there was a woman during the pre-Prohibition era that was an elderly woman. She walked with a cane, and what she would do is she would go into bars and distilleries and either hit bottles, tables, or people, and to destroy those bars. And people started not going to bars or leaving whenever she showed up. So that's a form of brash tactics. Is it will either convince people to just stop doing that or support the movement or leave the area. So it can pull people in to support the movement, or or it can push people away and make them think, I don't want to be a part of this if this is what it means. Such as that woman, I think it was Carolina, Miss Nation. I know that was her last name. But also another thing that can show that was the riots during the BLM movement during the pandemic. And a lot of people decided that they didn't want to be with that or stand for those types of acts. And the destruction of property, the burning down of a police station and an Arby's, I believe, at one point. And they didn't want to support that kind of belief or those kinds of actions, so they stepped away from the movement. And so those are the brash tactics. And the positive tactics, or smaller, more not so violent or electronic tactics, would be visiting rallies, going door to door, talking to people about the issue, and giving them actual information instead of telling them to just support or to get out of the way. And so after talking about the strategies and then those tactics that people use, that movements have used largely throughout the world, I talked about the forms of influence. There's 4. There is neutral, negative, positive, and I believe the last wasn't any one of those. It was actually called just passive. And so what I mean by those is, obviously positive is no net loss, mostly net gain. Negative would be the polarizing effect, such as the brash tactic. You'll either lose people or you'll bring people in. And there's really normally no in between, and it's largely just a lot of loss or gain. And it's not always a good thing. And obviously the neutral is a little of both. It's very small amounts of either. And so then to talk about where I got this information, Robert H. Gass and John Cedars' book on persuasion. I learned about compliance gain and behavioral conformity. And then Dr. Cialdini's book on persuasion, where he talked largely about forms and the different ways you can use them. So thank you for listening, and this has been my term paper presentation on persuasion through social movements. Have a good night.